who gets the seat at the table.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you, and love this table. So the topic is who sits at the table, right? So often, who is sitting at the table? Is it about making decisions? Is it about influence? Do you have to have C-levels? So here I have 4 amazing ladies, which will discuss this topic. And I would like to start with the introductions, guys. Maybe you can start.
Sure. Hi, my name is Lois Bright. I think probably up here it says I'm the founder of Women in Gaming Africa, but I do also have a day job. So Women in Gaming Africa is my side hustle. But I've been in the gaming industry for over 15 years, predominantly working across the African market. I'm based here in Cape Town. And yeah, I'm just very passionate about women upliftment, specifically within Africa. So I'll pass over to you, Denise.
Thanks, Lois. Yeah, hello everybody. My name's Denise Chinapin, and I'm the co-founding executive at Shift Technology. I started my career in the gaming space 25 years ago, and it's been a really, really thrilling one from start to where I am now. A lot of what I do is really just positioned at helping businesses get to a stage of scalability, helping them to navigate the complexity of it, and really turn strategy into measurable impact. So really looking forward to being here today with all of this wonderful panel of ladies. Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. My name is Bipelo Lintri. I'm a licensing and regulatory manager for BMM Testlabs. I've also been in the industry for a very long time, 2 decades already, 24 years to be exact. I started at a land-based casino where I worked as a technician for the slot machines. And recently, after COVID, with this online games evolving so rapidly, especially in South Africa, I work at the test laboratory where we're doing testing and certification of all the gaming modes. And I'm happy to be here.
Good morning. My name is Angela Mwelu. I work for Sharp Vision as the SVP for Africa. I'm relatively new in gaming, but I have extensive experience in IT, in technology and payments, having worked across Africa and Europe in multiple jurisdictions and industries. So glad to be here and happy to contribute.
Perfect, thank you, ladies. So I think it's the first question that I would like to address to all of you. And the question is we often celebrate participation in women. But what actually determines who gets the right access to the right rooms? The access where the strategy, where the capital and the growth decisions are made.
Who wants to kick off?
Maybe someone wants to start?
Yeah, firstly, what is participation? So my understanding of participation is just being there, being part of the meeting or being part of whatever is being discussed, but not having control over it. So an influence will be being able to change the decision, having an input. So my belief is that the people who get to get a seat on decision making is usually people who have power, people who have experience and they are well known, who have connections. However, I think as women, we need to be vocal. We need to be able to market ourselves. We need to be given the chance to also be able to be there and make the changes and have an impact in the industry especially.
I don't mind popping in here. So one of the things that I've been doing over the last 15 years is obviously running a recruitment business that faces Africa. And I wouldn't say that we have an issue with access, because I think there's plenty of women who are in the gaming industry. So I don't think that access is the issue. I actually think the biggest thing is access to more senior positions, because when we're looking, for example, if we're given, which we're probably at least monthly at the moment, C-level opportunities, when I go through and start looking at our sort of long lists of candidates, there's very few women in leadership positions. So it's not that we are not able to find good people. It's that often those shortlists end up just being male-dominated. So I think it's about access within organizations and potentially men or other women championing other women within those organizations for promotional opportunities and seeing why having a diverse leadership team will impact the profitability of that business. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Lois. It's access. Africa doesn't. There's no shortage of women in the tech and the gaming space, right? But what it really means is, how do we actually make that impact? And that impact, in many cases, comes from being able to have access, the right access, sponsorship from a perspective of where sponsorship is actually where you get a lot of the advocacy coming for women, for people in those sort of roles. At the moment, women are they're very rated in the delivery, overrated in the delivery space, but underrated in the senior roles that you were talking to. And that's really what we want to be able to get access to. For me, the access and getting access to those roles really is about making the impact. Through the impact, stepping it up to now, how do you actually focus on being that influence, being that voice in that space? And the one thing that I've pulled out from my experience over the years is that when you are in a position like that, it's easy to get stuck down in the details of talking at task level, of talking at just purely delivery level from day to day. But what does that actually translate to at a commercial level, at a commercial language? Senior roles speak to strategy, senior roles speak to risk, senior roles speak to revenue. What does that look like? And as women, if we are able to articulate all of what we are doing in the form of commercial language, then it's access, it's influence, and we're there.
I'm nodding so hard here because I fully agree with you with both what all of you have said. Getting access is easy, but it's the impact that you make when you're there, which determines whether you're promoted while you're there, whether you're invited back again, whether you pivot or you're referred. And as you've mentioned again as well, it's about delivery. What are you known for? You need to be able to be strategic. You need to be able to be a problem solver. What becomes your brand in terms of execution, and that's what ensures that you remain within that space. And I agree with what Lois has said as well. The higher you go, the thinner the pipeline becomes in terms of women in strategic positions. Again, we have to package ourselves. We have to work on ourselves. We have to package ourselves and think as those levels require, and stop doubting ourselves, and stop overthinking, and knowing that it's possible to do it.
Thank you so much, ladies. And what's nice, you're all coming from different backgrounds, right? So maybe I will start asking you each and every one question coming from your background. So let's start with Boipelo. You're coming from regulatory and compliance side, right? So you're dealing a lot with the institutionals and structures. So what I wanted to ask you in those areas, in those fields, right? What have you seen still limiting women's access to decision-making spaces? And if you can tell us, how can we open those doors intentionally?
Forgive me, but it's going to be difficult to answer this question without looking back at how women were perceived in the past culturally. We all know that women were always to be at the back, not really in those big roles. However, I think that many of the barriers, whether structural or institutional, stems for women being underrated and not really valued. So with so many, lot of decision-making spaces is really about narrative control. And who gets heard is not the person behind the microphone. It's actually mostly about the people who controls the story. So, yeah, most of the time you get in an organization which are led by men, but the people who are really making a big impact or contributing a lot is women, but because they are women, they're not really given the chance there. But it's up to us, ladies. I think we have it in us. We need to push those doors to change this. We need to be confident. We need to upskill ourselves, support each other and encourage each other. And we need to fight and be able to show our faces with courage. And you know, so women are strong, so I think it's possible to be able to build, to break those barriers. And yes, it is definitely possible.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your answer. So let's move on to Angela then. You coming from the commercial spaces, right? So from commercial perspective, what separates actual participation from real influence? And maybe you can tell us how organization can build systems that accelerate the transition.
As mentioned, getting into those spaces is easy. What separates being in those spaces and making an impact is really the value add that the individual is bringing to the table. As my colleagues alluded earlier, and as you mentioned, you need to be strategic. You need to have that mindset of an entrepreneurial mindset, you know, of ownership, of from a commercial perspective, from an innovation perspective, and be able to connect all those dots and bring them together and be a problem solver. The onus also is on the companies as well, to a good extent, but even if the companies have a very clear pathway to leadership, the remaining onus is on the individual. You need to equip yourself, you need to network, you need to, you know, continuous learning, in order for you to be positioned, and opportunity when it comes, it will meet you prepared as well.
Perfect, thank you so much. So Denise, you have experience of a founder, which is quite unique, and it's amazing for a woman. So maybe you can tell us what is one often overlooked aspect of influence, right? Something beyond the titles or seat counts. And maybe what's your advice where organizations should look into?
Yeah, so, you know, people tend to often get stuck on titles, headcounts, and often that's only the start of it, right? You really need to be focusing about where does risk lie, what exactly does the capital space look like, and who makes the decision around that? Who are the people that actually get to talk about it, get to discuss these things, talk about what the strategic priorities actually are. And you know, for a lot of that, it doesn't mean that only those people who appear at the top end of the organizational chart are the people that need to be there making those decisions. We need to be factoring budget allocations. We need to be factoring what the risk looks like. You know, at the end of the day, for me, when I look back at my journey and my career, it really started when I was able to articulate going from day-to-day delivery to translating that. And that's often one aspect of what's overlooked. At an operational scale, again, because of not because of hierarchy and things like that, but it's about decision making. What exactly are you in control of? What are you able to have access to? How do you turn what you are doing on a regular basis into what this looks like for a company at an organizational and a commercial level? I think it's something that Angela actually mentioned. You know, it's always about us looking at it and saying, how do we actually get there? But what are we actually doing to stay there? You know, the impact is actually what gets us in the room. It's that relevance that actually makes sure that we get invited back. And so we want to be in a space where influence is exercised. We're able to be there not just after the fact. You know, I always say that There's a difference between you being involved in a conversation at the table, contributing to strategic decision-making and strategic priorities, and what the risk mitigation actually sort of looks like. It's another thing when you are sitting there and you hear about the decision, right? Because when you're sitting and you hear about a decision that's been made, you're being change managed. You haven't really contributed to that point of where all of those discussions were in the fluid process of where could this be, where could we go? And so I believe that the kind of question that we should be asking as organizations is, how many women are at the table? I've been in spaces where I've been the one sitting at the table. I've been in spaces where I've been one of two sitting at the table. You know, where are more of them? And so the real questions that we really need to be asking are, how many of them are at the table? Who controls risk? Who controls revenue? Who controls what that looks like at a strategic level before it sets in, before it's final?
Perfect. And I think this actually leads us to the right question, and Louise can help us because she's advocating for women in gaming, right? And she's helping us to create those networks. So Louise, from this ecosystem standpoint, right? So how these networks and these community structures can create access for the women, right? That are not usually visible for the corporate hierarchies.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to talk about my passion here. So people who've had the touch point with Women in Gaming Africa will already know that we launched this time last year with the mentorship program, which we launched in partnership with the Mentorship Academy. I'm hoping Brenda might be here, but she is going to be here for our mentorship lunch in a couple of hours. I think having mentorship is really important. It's something I've been talking about with so many women over the years, is that often if you are at a senior level, or even if you are in that sort of gradient of going into a senior level, it can be quite lonely, and you can sometimes be the lone wolf. I myself have been in that scenario, having founded a couple of other businesses, and often I'm, the only female sitting at a table. I'm the only woman sitting on in a boardroom, and it would be nice to have a female to look up to then see, not saying monkey see, monkey do, but to have mentorship from someone who might understand your position more than a man might. And so I think the mentorship thing is really big. And I also think having this community, I think all of us who've been touch points within Women in Gaming Africa will agree that it has only strengthened our position within the industry because we have other women that we can ask for help. I mean, we have such a big community I think we've got over 1,000 people now across the continent that are part of Women in Gaming Africa. And, we've created, I would have loved to have had someone to sort of measure all of our, have measurables, but people have created job opportunities, people have made business deals. There's been so much connection that has gone through this community. I think that community is the way forward, and not just within gaming, not just with women's networks, but I think community is going to be the biggest bastion of the future of how society kind of works. I think we're going to go back to the roots of being community-led. So yeah, I do think that the mentorship, and obviously our leadership track as well. So I've just talked about mentorship, but we also have a leadership track which has been sponsored. Well, in fact, I've sponsored one place, but we've had sponsorship. It's through Soroka. They're a US-based transformational leadership program specifically for the gaming industry. We've just started last week with 2 scholarships. We would like more businesses to come forward and pledge sponsorship so we can put more women through this transformational leadership program. So I think it's about kind of pulling together, not just as a community as women, but rallying more businesses to actually invest in what we need them to do, which is invest in the future leaders of the continent and of the industry.
Thank you so much, and thank you for supporting those communities and bringing awareness to us. So when we were discussing our subject and preparation for this panel, the aspect of imposter syndrome came up, and I was thinking not many men would actually start with those questions, right? But as women, we were talking about imposter syndrome. So guys, what do you think? Are women turning down their high position because of the imposter syndrome, or they're simply not being offered? And maybe more broadly, like, is leadership is a title or a role can exist without a C-level?
Sorry, what is the second question? Is it?
So is leadership, it's a title, or the role can exist without having a title, without a C-level?
I'm just going to quickly jump in here just quickly. I think this is a great question because we get so obsessed with the C-suite label that we forget that leadership does not have to come from C-level people. Leadership can be someone who just has a natural flair for leading people. They could be a team leader inside your business. They could be someone working in operations. They could be working in any part of your business. But if they have qualities that are, traditionally seen as leadership, why do we have to keep thinking that leadership is only for people at C-suite? You can have fantastic people inside your business who have leadership qualities that can be nurtured within that specific sphere and might never reach the C-suite and don't need to reach the C-suite. And quite frankly, there's so much onus put on being at C-suite, but I can tell you now from sitting in that area for the last 15 years, sometimes I wish I could just go back to being an employee and not having the responsibility. So I think that leadership can be existing in all different stratas. So that would be my 2 cents, at least, that I'm throwing into the pot.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lewis. I think it's a bit of both. And yes, women sometimes do suffer from that imposter syndrome because of their previous experiences. But there's a change. We can see this week now, where now a lot of women, especially in the gaming industry, women in leadership is evolving. So what I can say is that leadership is not about the rank. It's about a team working together towards a common goal. And it's about each other knowing that we can do this if we actually trust, support each other, and mentor those who needs that. So, yeah, I think we're getting somewhere.
I just want to add to what Papelo and Lois mentioned. So I think at an imposter syndrome level, women just naturally, we're really, really hard on ourselves, right? We put these high standards up there, and it's something that we actually do that. No one's asking you to be here, but that's actually what you're wanting to aim for, and there's nothing wrong with that. So often, and statistically, when we compare ourselves to men, men generally, and statistics have actually shown that men will actually raise their hand for something new, or a new role, or whatever that is, when they're 60 to 80% ready. Women would not even consider, we would not even consider ourselves if we aren't even at a 70% mark, let alone even, let's not even talk about 100%. We want to get to a stage where we are perfect for this role. And you know what? It's too bad for you then, because at the end of the day, if you're going to wait for 100%, you're never going to get there and you're never going to step up. So I think for us as women, it's really been able to sort of say, let's raise our hand at 70%. There's a lot of training programs, there's a lot of investment that's actually happening across all the levels of advocacy for women, in terms of getting us to those positions, getting up to those senior roles. And we need to be able to step up and take advantage of that. We need to show up. In context of what Lois had mentioned around leadership and the question really around, do we wait for that C-suite title or do we actually start doing leadership before that? Again, pulling on my journey, it was really about identifying a particular need, stepping in long before I actually had a C-suite title. And there are moments where, absolutely, we look at a situation and we go like, it's just so much easier sometimes not being there. But leadership can be leadership without that C-suite label, without that title. I believe that a title cements it and makes it more tangible and concrete versus when you see a need and you have the ability and you have the opportunity to step up and help someone, you should take it. And that's actually being a leader. you're not a leader if no one's following you, right? And if there are people that are actually looking up to you and you're in a position to do so, then that's leadership.
Thank you.
I absolutely echo what my colleagues have said. Do you have an imposter syndrome? More often than yes. Is it necessary? No. And it's very similar to, I'll give an example from a product or technology perspective. When you have an idea, you don't wait for it to be perfect before you launch it to the market. Normally you launch a bit of it, you iterate until you get perfect, right? Yeah. And she'll be the same with roles as well. I mean, you do have something that you're bringing to the table, which you must have anyway. Get in the role, and then you will figure out, or you will learn on the role, and I like what Lois is doing from a mentorship perspective. Get mentors, right? Get people who are within that space who can take an aspect of the trajectory and aim to be like them, or see what they've done. Create a tribe around you of women who are doing what you aspire to do, or who are doing what you're doing, so there's no isolation within that space. But don't wait until all the dots are connected or for you to be 100% ready for you to be able to access that role. If you've never been on the board, you don't have to have been on a board for you to accept that invitation. Get in there, because you're bringing an aspect, whether it's from technology, product, HR, or whichever line of specialty you are in, and then contribute and learn as whilst you're there. But also take the initiative to learn more on the side about the space that you're occupying.
Thank you, Angela. And actually, since you're talking about it, so you're a very high senior level, right? So was it confidence before the title, or title before the confidence?
Don't focus on the title, as they've said, right? Just create a brand about yourself, around yourself. Be known for delivery. Be known to connect the dots. Be a problem solver. Be able to articulate complex situations and break them down in the most simplistic way. Be able to read the room and know which direction the conversation is going. Be empathetic if you're talking from a customer perspective. And a customer in this sense could be in many different aspects. It could be someone you're recruiting. It could be a regulator, an operator. So whoever it is, your customer, empathize from their end, and then and reach the conversation from that perspective. Then when that becomes your brand, it speaks for itself, and the titles will come inevitably.
Thank you so much.
Don't chase a title, because you will be up there with no depth, no substance, and it will not take long for that not to be seen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And maybe next question goes to Louis then, right? You are meeting women. You're always speaking with women. You're in the community. What do you see the most? Is it confidence before the title, or title before the confidence? Is it external worries that the women have that they cannot make it, or is it organizations do not want to promote them?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, I have noticed, having been more involved with speaking to more women on a one-to-one basis because of Women in Gaming Africa, what I have realized is there's a lot of people that don't have the confidence, women that don't have the confidence in themselves, but yet sometimes, and I'm sure we can all agree on this, in fact, I think everyone in this room will have this similar thing. Sometimes when you can see something in someone else that they can't see in themselves, I think that's one of the biggest gifts that we can give someone. If you see something in someone and you think, that I'm going to tell them that they have a great quality of this, or they do something well here, or they were brilliant public speaking, or whatever it is, tell them, because sometimes people need an affirmation that the confidence comes from getting the affirmation. So I think that for me, I think it's the confidence, because I think that women are not championed enough into leadership positions, and therefore you either have to create them yourself by becoming a founder, or hope that you have someone who is supporting you through that track into, again, going back to title, into C-suite, for example.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So maybe next question goes to Denise. In regards to the leadership strategy perspective, right? So what one systematic change, and it could be a policy, a culture, or a process, that would have the most long-term impact in diversity in leadership?
So you heard me talk a lot about commercial language, being able to take a daily operational sort of something and turn it into what it actually means at a business impact level. And this really, for me, it means the systematic, the one key thing that we should actually look at doing from a leadership level is really embedding early access into revenue ownership, into career pathways. We don't often talk about career pathways and what that next sort of stage looks like, but I believe that is certainly something that we need to be focused on. We're not talking mentorship circles and panels to discuss and to continue discussing. It's really to that point of where we want to make more than just policy change, because let's face it, right? Organizations write policies and put them into handbooks, and who really goes and looks up those things? And so, for me, it's just really being able to design into all of the roles from delivery all the way through, what does that actually look like in terms of the next steps that one would need to do? And it could really mean embedding all of those things from the get-go, right? We're talking about making sure that there's exposure to risk. You know, we mentioned access, we mentioned impact. But what does that really actually look like? We don't want to be in a position where if we have never groomed for a certain level of seniority and business-based understanding, that 10 years after just focusing on an operational perspective, we look back and we go, actually, there's such a limited diversity here at the table. It's because we didn't build for it. You know, when you look at beginning with the end in mind, it changes the outlook, it changes the perspective in terms of what you are focused on starting with your end goal. And so we want to be able to, you would want to make sure that you have the career pathways lined out. You've got enough of that in there because you're able to show the capability being developed over a period of time. Exposure to that is actually what speaks to confidence, because the more you do something, the better you get at it. The more you do something, your ability to step into that and adapt sharpens to the extent of where, when you do look at it now, 10 years later, you've got diversity at the table. And so my key thing would be focus on building that into the career pathways. You want to be able to make sure that at the end of the day, when you do look back, having restructured what your pipeline actually looks like, you'll see it out at the end because it automatically arrives there.
Perfect, thank you so much. Ladies, so we have last 3 minutes left, and we have some questions from the audience, right? So let me just read some questions, and whoever wants to take it, please feel free. So, do sponsorships and mentorship play different roles in career progression? And are companies investing enough in both? Louis, do you want to take it? I think it's your question.
Yeah, look, I think obviously with this sponsorship that we've just received for the leadership track that we are putting people through, it would be great if more businesses came forward, or if more businesses opened up opportunities for women inside their businesses to go through formal leadership training. And I think there probably is access within larger organizations, and obviously in some countries there will be a payoff for that business sponsoring people through more educational sort of training, on-the-job training. But I think with mentorship, I mean, the beauty of our mentorship scheme is that it's completely free. It's all based on volunteers, because you're essentially, if you're a mentor or a mentee, you're entering into sort of like a contractual obligation to mutually give up an hour of your time a week. But funny enough, I don't think Gail's in the audience, but I was having a conversation with Gail last night, and she said she's mentoring someone at the moment through our mentorship scheme, and she said, I can't believe the profound effect it's had on me and my career. And that's the thing that I think is amazing, that with mentorship, people think it's one-sided, the mentee is getting everything and the mentor isn't. But the reality is both the mentor and the mentee benefit. So I think really pushing more people into the mentorship schemes that we have on offer or other businesses might do, I think it benefits a business long term. Sorry, I don't want to take up any more time, so pass it over to someone else.
Perfect. Maybe two more questions for the ladies. Angela, the quick one to you. What role does board composition plays in shaping eventually moves into the executive leadership? It's the first question now. Yeah.
I'll go for the second one. I think I'm more equipped, and then you can take the third one. How important is international exposure for advancing senior roles in African gaming? I don't think it's only limited to African gaming, but also international exposure for me, and Lois, correct me because you're in that space. It's not only beyond the continent, it's within Africa. What it gives you is that cultural awareness. What it gives you is how the other, be able to have that comparative within different spheres of business. So when you're making decisions locally, you're able to make them with a global knowledge. Does it give you an advantage? To a large extent, but from a leadership perspective, it just gives you that wider perspective from other cultures in other countries.
Perfect. I think our time is up. Ladies, we will be able to answer any of your questions. Please come to us and we will discuss it with you. Ladies, I encourage you to come in the middle to take a quick photo and then we can continue.